Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to this next in the session of community interactions. My name is Kathleen Irwin. I think probably I know most of you or all of you, but I am on the executive team of OnCue Performance Hub hosting these events. And we're grateful at the moment, or I guess more than at the moment, we work on Treaty 4 land, the territory of the Nehewawak, the Anishinaabeg, the Dakota, the Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Mischief Nation. And we recognize the past and ongoing harms experienced by these people and embrace a mandate to work with them in fostering greater understanding and a better way forward. In this session, we focus on scenography for independent artists, and we'll be joined by Beth Kates, who I've been chatting with. And she is, among many other things, the co-creative director and designer of Playground Studios. And Beth, I'm just going to read a few words by way of an introduction. And people have been hearing you chat, so they now know where you are and where you've studied, but maybe you can flesh that out, because I think what I'm going to now read takes us up to about 8 or 10 years ago. So there's a decade that you might want to fill in. In any event, Beth is an award-winning theatrical lighting set, costume, and projection designer for the theater, production manager as well, and project consultant. She is the co-creative director and designer of Playground Studios, a design firm she started dedicating to creating new spaces, reinventing the use of traditional and non-traditional theater spaces, as well as producing original work and offering a full spectrum of design and project management services. Her work in rock and roll, dance, theater, opera, and photography has taken her across Canada, the US, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. Her work as a projection designer began in 1995, and over the years, she has become a self-taught video editor, videographer, photographer, graphic designer, and animator in order to facilitate the creation of various projects. She was awarded in 2005 the Dora Mavor Moore Award for Outstanding Writing Design. In 2009, she, along with her husband, Ben Chasen, was nominated for the prestigious Sceneography Prize in Theatre and were cited as one of Toronto's top 10 theatre artists by Now magazine. Beth leads masterclasses and workshops in projection and theatrical design and works with Playground Studios and Playwrights Workshop Montreal to create a series of in-depth production workshops geared towards established theatre artists. As a photographer, Beth's work has been published internationally, and in 2011, her photographs were exhibited at the Ben Neve Gallery in Toronto. Beth works as well with Funkland, the Alastro Citizens, creating epic projection designs, and also collaborates with Ninja Funk Orchestra, creating costumes and elaborate creative original projection designs, as well as acting as their executive producer. And I'm sure there is much more to add. So over to you, Beth.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's a blast from the past.
I'm worried about that.
No, thank you so much, Kathleen. It's nice to have all of those older pieces brought back into the present. And so, yes, so I'll flesh that out a little bit. Indeed, I am zooming into you here from Okinses, from Calgary, Treaty 7 land, Métis Region 3. And I also like to always take a moment when we're in these digital settings to acknowledge what's happening right now. So right now we are all sitting in space together, which is really wonderful. And we're doing it through wires and materials, your computers, your phones, however you're engaging with us, which all incorporate precious resources, both material resources and human resources. So there's a great deal of challenging parts to that, because we know that human resources are taken advantage of in order to allow us all to gather here today. And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the cost, the human cost, the cost to the earth for our digital communication tools, and offer gratitude for that, because it does allow us to gather. It allows me to share sitting here in Calgary, and zooming over to you in Saskatchewan. It's really a great privilege, and I'm honored to be here and grateful for these tools that bring us here all together. So just to, yeah, I'll do a really quick like update from 2011. So the last 12 years have been pretty busy as our tools have changed. I have taken a lot of shows on tour. I've done a lot of work and all over the country. We've done stuff at the Shaw Festival. We've done stuff here in Calgary. And most importantly, I think in the last 8 years, a lot of my work has included explorations and research into the incorporation of virtual reality and augmented reality in our theater practices. So not in a game development sense, but in a theater development sense. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I travel through some of the work that I'm going to offer you. Today, though, also as we will travel through my work a little bit to give you some context, and I want to focus on creating work that can tour, creating work that you can pack into a suitcase and take off into the world, and look at different ways that we can incorporate design and technology into that, the ways we can dramaturgically integrate design and projection and physical objects into our writing, into our practice, into the process of creating work that can be brought out to the world. So I'm going to do yield starting to screen share, and we'll get a little slideshow rolling. I'm going to talk at you for a while. I want to encourage everyone to like throw stuff into the chat as you come up with questions. We'll be monitoring that, and I'll try to catch them as we go along. And I also wanted to invite everyone, if you wanted to share what your experience is with taking work on tour, if you're in the development process for something, it would be great if you could share that while I start my little screen share, which is always, always a thing with Zoom. Okay. We don't want that. That's a white screen. We don't want a white screen. So we're going to share this. Okay, we're going to start. There we go. So you should see the title slide now. I'm just going to make sure that, and I'm going to be looking away from you, which is not my desired place to be, but it is where we're at. It's what the technology is allowing us today. I just want to make sure my sound is shared. Great. Okay, here we go. So
Beth,
yes,
it's not on the first slide. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
As long as you knew.
Perfect. Yes. So just as a quick overview of what we're going to try to hit here in the next hour and 15, I'm going to go through some of my work. We're going to go through some case studies that are specific to the touring idea. I'm going to throw in a couple of other little gems in there that will hopefully get ideas percolating about what touring work is, the potential of integrating the technologies and allowing you to open up the world of storytelling. We'll talk a little bit about the development process and dramaturgical integration of design, which is at the heart of my own practice. We'll also talk about some tools, the actual things that you can use to make this work, some tips and tricks from the road, and then we'll wrap up at the end. I think we're going to leave ourselves 20 minutes to half an hour of Q&A. So there we go. It's a lot to cover, and feel free to chime in whenever you want in the chat, and I'll try to get questions as I can. I've got windows going on all over the place, so great. Excellent. A tour of My Name is Rachel Corey. Oh, what a piece. What a piece. Okay, great. So yes, as Kathleen introduced me, I am a lighting, set, projection, video, and as any academic knows, we're struggling with terminology around what projected media is called, video media is called. So we're now settling on multiple realities, extended realities. But that's part of what I do. And I'm also a VR designer, and I work a lot with creating live performance work in VR. I'm also a digital dramaturg, which is a term that means something different to me, I think, than it does to like LMDA. A digital dramaturg in my understanding of it, and what I've come to define it, is someone who is involved with a production or with a playwright, who can start to really help the playwright or the production or the director understand what the digital technologies can offer to a production, to a playwright. It's also about dramaturging the affordances of the digital technologies and what they're able to provide us. And then, as I was chatting with Kathleen, I'm also an educator. I teach right now as a sessional at the University of Calgary, and I've taught at the Banff Center, and I've taught at York, and presented at the Prague Quadrennial. So I've been all over the place. We're just going to walk through a little bit of my work here, which is zipping by. So this is just some little taste. This is a production of Sherlock Holmes and Raven's Curse. Just a few little samples of what my world has looked like over the last 10 to 15 years. This is Alice in Wonderland at the Shaw Festival. Lots of big stuff. And also lots of small stuff have been part of my career, my world. I have, as Kathleen mentioned, been working with projected media since 1995, long before we had digital technologies. And then here we are in the virtual world. This is me in Altspace VR, which is a social gathering platform in what Mark Zuckerberg has stolen as the metaverse. It is a place where we gather from all over the world. We are these funny little avatars with no legs and no arms, but we've got hands. And I make performance work in these spaces. And so those people behind me are actually coming in from all over the planet, as are the people. And oh, my little cursor's coming, as are the people here. This was using a business-based platform where you do have legs, which was really fun, but they didn't move. You just kind of float around the world. This was at Laval VR at the very beginning of the pandemic, where 3,000 people gathered for a conversation and a conference about virtual reality, and myself and 3 other explorers of VR gathered to put together performance in basically an office space, and we were pushing at the boundaries of the platform. So that's a lot of what my contemporary work has done, which is not touring, because of course in the last few years we haven't been able to tour very well, very consistently, and so that's given rise to this form of virtual reality theater. Finding Pandora, which is a piece that I did the lighting design and scenography for, is a piece fully in virtual reality. So these are performers telematically transported into these avatars and then brought into Mount Olympus. And we then all worked from all over the world to put this show together. And then people from further parts of the world then joined us, and we've been doing performances for the last 3 years. This is produced by a company named Double I Studios out of New York City, artistic directed by Kira Benzing. And this is me setting lights, just like we do in real life, setting virtual lights, but that's me and my avatar in this world. And so we're able to create really beautiful, really full scale worlds in a way that we understand in theater. We know how to make 3D worlds that are immersive. Virtual reality theater is very much like immersive theater, but you can fly, and you can turn into a particle, and you can be a god, or you can be, in this case, a Greek chorus back in both Greek times and contemporary times, and future times. A lot of when I talk about virtual reality, it for me opens up access to other worldviews. So we're able to expand our storytelling in a way that we can't in the physical world, where we're locked to physics. In the virtual world, we are not locked to physics. We're freed from them. We're freed from our bodies. We're freed from our social circumstances. And so we're really able to open up and crack open storytelling and engage with other ways of knowing, which is, to me, really, really exciting. So that sort of brings you up to 2023. On a personal level, I always like to present my son, Aaron. He is currently 11, and he has been with me in theaters and creation spaces forever, since he was born, and is a huge part of my practice, and is one of the great eyes for me as I make work. And he says, I don't like the way that looks, or I don't like the way that sounds, and then we get to have a conversation about it. So I am above all else a mother. Great. So that brings us to really big shows. Taking really big shows on tour is a whole other beast. Something I've done a lot over the years. This is Vigilante by Catalyst Theater in Edmonton. So I've transferred a lot of big shows all over the planet. Whole other kettle of fish from really small shows. This is Spin by Evelyn Perry, which has toured for many years. And so we're going to focus more into this world and what it means to create really small shows that can go on tour in a really easy way. This is a big country. I've been in lots of vans going back and forth across the country and up north, and there's so many logistical challenges that actually can really provide us with really wonderful creative opportunities. So like Kathleen took us back in time, we're going to go back in time. We're going to look at, depending on how fast I can talk, we're going to look at a bunch of different shows that I was a deep collaborator, co-creator on all of these shows. And I actually also was the touring designer. So I have an equity card as well, so I can stage manage these shows. I did a lot of things over the early part of my career in particular to allow these shows to come into being, so that I production managed and stage managed and designed and co-wrote, and that I think has allowed a lot of these shows to come into being. So we're going to go fairly quickly through most of these so we can get to the real nitty-gritty stuff, but I think they all offer really beautiful and very different approaches to things. So Homer, The Simpsons Do, Macbeth was created by Rick Miller and William Shakespeare, because it is Shakespeare, and it is indeed The Simpsons doing Macbeth. And so I have a little clip here so you can get a sense of what that felt like. This is when we took the show. We traveled to 49 of the 50 states. We took it to Australia and New Zealand. We took it to the UK. We took it all across Canada. So we did thousands and thousands of shows. And this was actually a recording of a performance that we did outdoors in California. And so I'll just let it speak for itself.
After 400 years, William Shakespeare's Macbeth has remained intact until now.
Is this a dagger which I see before me? Or a
Pizza. The London Independent says Mac Homer, Rick Miller's impersonation of the entire cast of The Simpsons doing Macbeth, is both hilarious and awe-inspiring.
Where's the place?
Upon the heath.
Where to meet with Macbeth?
God, don't say that. It's bad luck.
One dysfunctional family does another in a one-man multimedia extravaganza that's fast, furious, and fun for the whole family.
Oh, horror!
Oh, knock, knock, knock. Oh, damn spot. This role sucks, man. Fly, good fly-ons, flatlet.
The LA Times calls Mac Homer impeccable. The Chicago Reader, phenomenal.
Fire that Shakespeare fellow.
He's dead, sir.
Excellent.
So there you go. That is Mac Homer, which we toured it for almost 17 years. By the time we packed it all up and put it away in storage forever, had a huge video design component and a really, really complicated lighting design that we managed to replicate every single time. And so this is something we'll keep coming back to, this idea of self-containment. So though our lighting wasn't self-contained, all of our technology was. And this is something that you'll see repeat through these different case studies, because that's one of the keys, I think, to making a work that is easy to tour. Is you want, this is the ground plan of Mac Homer. I'll zoom, it zooms in a little bit here. So small footprints, self-contained, but you can still get really sophisticated with looking at where you can bring the details to life. So in the case of Mac Homer, one guy on stage with this one set piece, and in that, back up a little bit, in that television, which broke apart into many little pieces so that it folded flat, we could take it on the airplane with us. Inside that cauldron are all the little props that he needed. The TV screen that's behind him was a collapsible video screen that we created this painted drop that went around it, that rolled up, and basically this whole show fit into 2 suitcases and one large crate that when we were touring before 9/11 was very easy to get on airplanes and got progressively more challenging. But and then a projector, we toured with our own projector, our own switcher, and our own camera. So everything was ours. We came in, poop, plopped the show down on stage, spent about 8 hours setting it up, and then did as many shows as we needed to do, and then packed it back up, went back on the road and took it to the next venue. And that served us really well for many, many years, and is actually what gave birth to the next piece that I'm going to talk about, which is Bigger Than Jesus, which also was a one-man show, also Rick Miller, and heavily influenced by what we learned from doing Mac Homer. So I'll play a tiny little clip of some very now old looking video.
Who am I to question God? Is this your will? The soldiers come, they're looking for me. And here I stand, scared stiff with fear. I'll rise up to the challenge. I'll take it like a man. Who am I to question my Father's holy plan? Your flesh and blood.
It is finished. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless us, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. The Mass is ended. Go in peace and love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So I think I could probably take the next 2 hours just to talk about this show and what it meant to tour it, because it was extraordinarily complicated. We had flying set elements. There we go. We had, by the end of its touring life, it had 6 cameras. There were all kinds of, there was sand that fell from the sky. There was that triangle that you saw fly in the video. So the screen itself flew out during the show, and we only 3 or 4 times during its touring life did we actually run this in a fly house. So we were bringing our own flying systems with us to every venue, which meant full adaptation of everything. It was pretty complicated, but it was incredibly rewarding. Myself and Ben Chason toured with it throughout the life of the show, which also meant as designers, we were able to caretake our designs, but also allow the show to breathe and grow as shows always do. But taking it and adapting it for each venue was really complicated, which we knew we were getting into that when we started adding all this technology, including there were 2 projectors in this show. There were, like I said, the 6 to 8 cameras, of pretty complicated lighting design, but all done with the idea of touring in mind. So this was a more complicated setup than Macomber. Macomber, we could load it in the morning and do a show at night. Bigger Than Jesus took a couple of days to set up. And so that was a big part of where it limited us to tour. We had certain height restrictions, we had certain depth restrictions too, in order to get that image size. If we were touring this show now, with contemporary technology, it would be much easier. You're going to see in the next couple of slides just the variation of theaters that we were in over the years, everything from the Grand Theater in London to this small, tiny little space in Miami, where I think we had 50 seats or something. We did it in the Big Secret here in Calgary. Lots of stuff involved with this, requiring a couple of people on tour with it. So that's always something to take into consideration too, is like, what's your capacity for human resources? A lot of technical requirements, which, as I said, like limited where we could play, but designed with the idea that we could play in most spaces in the country. So it was a certain height, and that was taken into consideration based on sort of what we know theaters are generally capable of hosting. Like, we didn't make something that was 28 feet tall. We made something that was 12 feet tall because we knew that could fit into pretty much any black box space, and certainly any proscenium or fly house. We have even done it on a thrust. We've done it, like, we managed to get this show into so many different orientations and so many different spaces that and it looked as it was supposed to look in every space. So, and I think that comes back to the integration of design into the process, because the design and the show were created together. So Daniel Brooks and Rick Miller would work together and come up with ideas, and then Ben Chason and myself would then make those come into being, and then we'd come up with ideas and they'd bring that into the show, and on and on and on it went over a 3-year iterative process. Always with touring in mind, always with, like, can we fold this up and put this into a box or suitcase or our carry-on luggage, which is what we did lots and lots of. And speaking of carry-on luggage, that brings us to Spin, which was also created and designed for touring. So this is by the great Evelyn Perry, who's a beautiful performer and musician and writer. And this was a fairly simple, but, like, you can see there's all kinds of stuff on stage. We have a bicycle that was one of the musical instruments. We have Anna over there on stage, right, with her electronic incredible setup that then eventually morphed into 3 live musicians, and then Evelyn with her work there. And this was, again, a heavily integrated, very complex video design on a single screen. Again, a screen that folded up and got packed into a box with a small projector that got carried onto the airplanes. The bike was probably the biggest touring element. We took up, again, a very, very small footprint. So that's about 5 or 6 feet upstage of the screen. The screen was 9 feet by 10 feet. So it still had presence on stage, but was small enough that we knew we could go into tiny, tiny little spaces. And in fact, the space that it was created in is Tallulah's Cabaret in Toronto, which is the cabaret space of Buddies in Bad Times. So a tiny little club, basically. And we put this kind of big show in this tiny little club, and it just filled the whole space. So on a big giant stage, the video design could be expanded to larger screens too, which was something that we took into consideration. And again, a lot of the details, so a lot of these bike elements that were on Anna's table were elements that could just be popped off and put onto basically any table that the theater provided for us, as long as we could put screws into it. So that's another piece of touring that I find really compelling to think about when you're creating a show is, what can I get anywhere? Are there elements of design that could be something that I know I can go to Canadian Tire or to Walmart or the dollar store and get wherever it is that I'm going? And how can that influence the work? I'm going to play a little trailer.
Would you take a dare wager? What would you wear? Would you wear bloomers? Would you leave your home without any money? Would you care if people look to you funny? Annie Londonderry, Annie Londonderry, Annie Londonderry, road ordinary. In 1894, a young woman by the name of Annie Londonderry began her journey to become the first woman to ride around the world on a bicycle. Annie Londonderry, Annie Londonderry, road ordinary. She gets on her bicycle, she gets on her bicycle, she gets on her bicycle, she rides, she rides, she rides.
That little bit of clip right at the beginning. I'm just going to back up just so we don't have to see that little clip right at the beginning of the spin video is Evelyn riding her bike, and it's a piece that we recreated for every city or town that we went to. So she would get all into her Annie Londonderry costume, and we'd set off with someone riding a bike behind her, usually, or on a scooter, and filmed her in the place where we were. And which is something that the video technology and the beautiful affordances of being able to do digital capture and move it so easily now, is that we were able to go film her and bring it into the show. And so we had something that was very local, that was because what it does is it follows her along usually identifiable routes right up to the front door of the theater. And so really presencing the space that we were in. And we set up the show to start that way, which made it imperative that we had systems that could bring in that new video really quickly. It meant that the people we were on tour with, which was usually only one person, I would sometimes pop in and out, but it was usually just touring with a production stage manager. They were the ones who needed the skills to then bring that video into the production. But it meant that we had a very local flavor to it right off the top, which was really beautiful. So Okay, so now to throw something completely different at you, just to really think outside the theater box and inside the toy box. This was a production, an immersive, like interactive immersive installation of play called The Toy Box, which was originally commissioned by SummerWorks in Toronto, that it was Ben and my idea to bring theater technology tools and put them in the hands of just anyone. So setting up lighting, video, and sound in particular with live cameras and all kinds of different feeds happening. We had green screens, we had Play-Doh, we had Lego. This was the version where we threw literally everything into the room. We had balloons, we had balloon sculptors come in. We had all kinds of stuff so that people could just explore the tools and play. And what came out of this was this beautiful community gathering space. So we had all of these things, but we also then saw people start to develop stories. And so what we decided to do was, again, rebuild it from the SummerWorks free-for-all spaghetti at the wall version into something more curated, but contained, and so that we could take it anywhere. All we needed was an 18 by 20 foot truss system like you see in this picture set up, and all of our soft goods, all of the screens, all the projectors came with us. We would rent the lights in whatever venue we were in. All those foam tiles came with us. So we tried to make things as lightweight, as foldable, and as all of these screens were stretchy too. So if we ended up in a space that was smaller than what we actually needed, and this was our desired footprint, 18 by 20, if we ended up somewhere smaller, the screens stretched. So they could be small, or we could stretch them to their full capacity, which meant that we were more able to take it to different places. And we were in the atrium of City Hall in Toronto during the reign of Rob Ford, which was very interesting to then watch city councilors come and play with our stuff. We did it at Theatre Passe Muraille. We did a whole bunch of community work. This was in City Hall in Toronto, which is one of my favorite before and after pictures. And we ran classes in there. We taught theater design in there. We did all kinds of things, and it was really, really fun. And it also took us all over North America, and took 2 people to set up and 3 people to run sometimes, depending on how big the classes were that we had in there, how many people we were trying to put through. But again, we were able to pick it up, pack it into, this one went into like more of a minivan and less of just carry on, but we could pack it up, put it in, and off we went. Technology that we needed could be rented. It was very adaptable to whatever space we could go in. And I think that's one of the keys to touring, is that notion of adaptability. And so then to talk about the one show, the one piece here that doesn't include much technology at all. There's no projection in this one. This is Ravi and Asha Jain's Brimful of Asha, which tells Ravi's story, Ravi and Asha's story of their journey through arranged marriage. And it's just, again, this other beautiful piece, very simple, one television screen that we could get at any venue, and then this beautiful gold fabric and the carpet designed by Julie Fox, and a table that came from the venue, and a tea set that came from the venue, and samosas that came from whatever town we were in. And if there were no samosas, then Asha would make them. Really, really compact, really easy to tour, a very simple but evocative lighting design, a very small footprint. So again, it could go into a boardroom if it needed to, and we put the fabric up with pipe and drape. Really, really beautiful little touring package that had great impact and great resonance, and was completely designed to tour. So then that brings us to Malaria Lullaby, which was put into the Fringe. So this never toured, and the reason that I'm speaking about it today is more because of what it represents. And it was a really complicated video design, huge show. We had aerial acrobats, all kinds of stuff going on. We had the bed flew, we did all kinds of really, really, really crazy stuff in a Fringe setting. And we did it because we had the people with us who knew how to do it. So we had riggers, we had myself and Ben Chason as on the video and the set. We had everybody knew exactly what they were doing, and we were lined up like military style to get this in, and we teched it in 3 hours, and we managed to put it up in 20 minutes every single time we did it. So when you're thinking about Fringe work, you don't necessarily have to think like egg and spoon and a chair and that's your show. You can actually think broadly. You just need the people in line who can do it. And that's the big key as well. And then so just one more piece to really bring it into a very contemporary place. But this piece, Bury the Red, which was created in 2019, and we just did it again this summer, is a piece that blends together virtual reality, augmented reality, and live performance. And it was I could talk about this piece for 2 hours, which I won't, but it was designed to be as compact as possible so that we could take it anywhere. So even though it's incredibly high tech, this is it. This is all we need. We need this 10 by 15 space. We don't even really need the fabric that you see. We just need a small space that can get dark. We don't really need to control lighting because most of that's done within the virtual reality. And we just need enough space for an audience member and an actor and a chair and a table. And then there's some bones and some stools. But we created this piece so that it could, and this one really can go into a carry-on and a suitcase, even though it's super high tech, and that was done intentionally so that I knew that we could take it to festivals around the world. So that takes us through all of our case studies, which are many, and I thank you for welcoming them into your world. We're going to talk a little bit about tools to start with, because that's always a big question. It's like, well, how do I get video to the stage? How can I do it? Many of you, I'm going to assume, have heard of QLab. QLab has become an industry standard, in part because it's really affordable. So it has a rent-to-own capacity. And so it controls, or back up a little bit, it controls sound. So sound playback, and it has effects built into it. You can do quite a lot with it. It also controls video, and it can control lighting as well. That's one of their newer capacities. And that's all done out of a single machine. So one Mac and you're good to go, which is pretty incredible. And as the computers increase in what they're able to do, the QLab gets ever more exponentially detailed and complex. It's pretty easy to learn. It's got a great interface. They're an incredible company, Figure 53, who created it. They're an incredible company in terms of support. So when you run into trouble, all you do is shoot them an email, and within minutes, often you'll get somebody to help you. So it's pretty great. There's a lot of people now in our industry who know how to use it. So there's a wide knowledge base. And it does have this beautiful rent-to-own element to it, where the licenses go from like $4 to $7 a day. And so if you're just testing stuff out, or you're in a workshop and you're like, I don't know if this is the right tool for me, you can try it out. You can learn it yourself for free. So you can download it for free and play with it. You just can't there's a whole bunch of parameters that you don't have access to with the free tool, but it allows you to check it out. And then to purchase, it goes between 400 and 800 American dollars, which is really nothing in comparison to what some of this technology can cost. And it allows you, that's how we did Spin. That's how we would do Bigger Than Jesus if we were doing it now. We did it on DVDs and VHS and all kinds of matrices. But this really allows you to like put your show into a computer and off you go. And if you don't have the computer, you can actually build it and then send the file, and the theater where you're going maybe has the computer. So it's really, really flexible and really, really allows you to bring this new technology, or not new anymore, but this video technology. It's a complicated soundscape. You can bring mics into it. You can bring live cameras into it. So if you want to use live cameras in your production, it has the capacity to deal with that. And it's pretty robust. I have, knock on wood, it's never crashed on me in a show. It's only crashed on me when I've been building stuff and trying to like poke at the edges of it, see how far I can push it. So it's a really, really great tool. And the fact that it has become pretty standard, especially for sound in our industry, means that, like I said, that there are a lot of people that know how to use it. So there's lots of people who call and be like, help, I don't know how to do it. There's another piece Trichotronics created, Isadora, which is a video control system that can also generate content through the software. So it's much more complex. It's what we would call creative coding. So it's node-based coding. So it's not, you're not writing code, but you can write code and bring it in if you're so minded. It has a huge amount of flexibility, and it's pretty expansive, and it's affordable also. It's cross-platform, Mac to PC, and you can create content within it. You can bring your own content in, you can bring live cameras in. It's then just depends on what system you're driving it from, but it's also incredibly well supported. Mark Caniglio, who created it and continues to write it, is often the person who will respond to you when you're like, this is not working for me, and he'll either give you the tips and tricks, or I know people he's written code for when they're like, I'm trying to do this with my dance piece and it's not working, and he'll bash out some code and send it along. And so it's a really, really beautiful tool. There's more of a learning curve, I think, if you're not familiar with creative coding, but it is really powerful and really flexible and really affordable. So again, one of the reasons I'm talking about it in the context of touring. Integrated into all other creation processes. So there's other computer technologies, including Vectorworks, which creates, where you do your stage plan designs, your light plan designs. You could also create 3D models in there, which can then be used in your show. You can export a 3D model. There's tools like Photoshop and the rest of the Adobe suite, which is where you get into content creation. There's great tools like SketchUp, and I didn't write it out here, but Tilt Brush, tools that you can create three-dimensional paintings. So Tilt Brush is this amazing tool where you can either do it in VR, or you can do it on your computer, and you paint live in 3 dimensions, and then you can export that, and then it can become a thing on stage, whether it's a digital thing, a virtual thing, or you can 3D print out of it too. So there's lots of these great tools that I have brought into my practice that integrate with things like QLab and things like Isadora. So in terms of bringing technology into your show, these are the main pieces that you're looking at. None of them are free. SketchUp's free. Tilt Brush is pretty affordable. I think it's like $20 or $30 now. Obviously, the Adobe Suite isn't free, but it also has a rental license. Vectorworks is something that gets more complicated as you're making the ground plans for your show. So that's more on the designer side. And 3D printers, I've actually always wanted to create a show where we printed whatever we needed when we got to the venue. And so we're getting there. It's a technology that's developing for sure. I'm just gonna see, we have no questions yet. Okay, great. I'm just gonna keep barreling through the development process. So I get a lot of questions about this, is like, how do I even start? I don't know what's out there, so I don't know what I can do. And that's where the iterative piece comes in, and starting to bring in designers, technologists, production managers, stage managers, that knowledge base into your development process. So even if it's as a writer, having a conversation, I'm a big advocate of talking to designers as you're writing a piece, because there's things that we know about stuff you can do that can influence. And often I've worked on pieces where I was working with Trina Davies on silence, and we were in the rehearsal hall, and we had the technology in the rehearsal hall. And this was a well-developed, long-developed script. And we were working on something, and I did a thing, and she came up to me and she's like, you just solved that scene for me. I don't have to write the whole scene now. And so it's those kinds of connections in the development process that are really valuable. So when we're talking about touring too, the first point here, be practical, but be creative. The practicality is real, right? We all have limited resources, both time and money and logistics. But that practicality can actually lead to creativity. I think we're so good as theater artists at adapting, right? We can tell a whole play with a spoon and an egg and a chair. We can do it. So it's thinking about that too, like what's the practical element, like with Bigger Than Jesus, like we knew we needed to keep to a certain scale, but then how can we explode that, and how can we push at the edges? When you're thinking about touring, again, like I referenced earlier, what scale suits the story you're trying to tell? If you're trying to do a production of Rachel Corrie and you want to take it to many places, what does that mean? What kinds of places? Are you wanting to do it in libraries? Are you wanting to do it in black boxes or at fringes? Or so that scale, or bigger? Do you want to go big? And big is wonderful. Big comes with all kinds of other things. So the scale, what scale suits the story you're wanting to tell? And then what technology can you engage with? So that sort of goes back to the first point too. What can be engaged with to facilitate touring? In Bigger Than Jesus, we, like I said, we kept our footprint small on all those shows. We kept the footprint small because we knew we could expand if we needed to, but we didn't. We could also do it really small. Like a right here, things that fold are amazing. Things that go into your suitcase are great. Inflatables are great. Elements that can be sourced on site are great. In Bigger Than Jesus, the costume that I designed was from Mark's Work Warehouse, so that we knew we could replace it easily. It was a very, very physical performance. He went through pants like crazy because it was sand, so he was basically like kneeling on sandpaper for a big portion of the show. So the approach was like, what do we know we can replace that still looks like a costume? And as our technology increases in miniaturization, we now have micro projectors. So all of those shows that I showed you that needed like 6 to 10 feet upstage of the screen, we could do it now in 3 to 5 feet, which is like the leaps that have been taken technologically. There's also micro projectors now that are like no bigger than your phone, some of them. And so you can do really cool things with actors on stage with preloaded projectors. You can stream out of cell phones now to projectors. There's all kinds of really, really exciting things. Micro or LED technology too, in terms of lighting, has really increased as I sit in front of a ring light that's plugged into my computer, right? Like there's so many tools that have appeared particularly in the last 5 years, that we can synthesize into small scale touring, which is very, very exciting. And what those affordances are, what do they let us do? What stories do they let us tell? What does it mean if I'm standing here on stage and projecting something onto you as a performer? There's lots of great tools to explore there. And I think of everything, the biggest tip that I would give is simplicity, and really stay as self-contained as possible. Bring as much as you can. Like I've said, this suitcase and carry-on, rarely did I ever have my own stuff in a carry-on on an airplane. It was usually puppets and projectors and microphones. And so we brought it all with us, right? Be organized, assemble a really solid and knowledgeable team. That knowledge base of your team, their abilities, both in creating the show and then touring it, is a massive, massive, massive piece of this puzzle. Providing information to wherever you're going, whether you're being presented, whether you're self-producing. I had for Bigger Than Jesus and McHomer, they each had about a 20-page technical writer. And so that's a document that takes all the information about your show, all the technological and logistical information about your show, and synthesizes it into a well laid out document. And I refined it over the years, and I could not put enough information in there. And that really helped as part of the package that we'd either give to presenters so that they had a really good sense of what our show entailed, or then to production managers so that they knew what they needed to prepare. Ask for what you need. If your show needs 8 hours to set up, ask for it, because the worst, I mean, like we know the worst case scenario is someone says no, and then you start the dialogue. But ask for what you need and really stick to that, because it's your show. But with small scale touring, building in as much flexibility as you can is really, really, really important. And so that brings us to the links page, and I'll put these in the chat as well, just some links about some of the pieces that we've talked about. And that brings us to our Q&A time. So I will stop my screen share, and now I can look at you all on my screen. Great. Okay.
Great. Well, how exciting. Thank you very much, Beth. That was totally amazing. And so much information there. And I've got a few questions. I've got lots of questions, but I don't want to monopolize the Q&A. But a couple of really practical questions jumped into my mind right from the beginning. How long are the shows typically in development? Do you have a solid bunch of collaborators that changes over time or stays pretty much the same? Do you always work with the same people? And are you your own producers? Do you also, while you're developing the creative side of a show, also produce the tour? Or how much support do you have to do that? So those are 3 questions. Maybe I should repeat them. How long are you in development? Yeah, start with that.
Yeah. I'll start with the development piece, because that's a big one. I would say on average, it's no less than a year of development. Bigger Than Jesus took almost 4 years of development, but in that process, we did tour it. So we toured, so there were some people who saw a very early version of it that was very different from what we ended up. And that was intentional as part of the development process. We needed to road test some things. So I would say between 1 and 3 years. Bury the Wren took less time, believe it or not. That took about 6 months. It wasn't as not traditional theater. But yeah, and it takes time in a venue, whatever that venue might be, but anywhere that you can sit and work with your technology to get it integrated into the show. So with Spin, we had 2 workshop times where we were in the venue where we did the first production, and we actually got to play with all of the pieces, and that was critical to its development too. And I think that's been true even a sit down work, that ability to engage with all the tools together. So yeah, I'd say between 1 and 3 years, but not to scare anybody off, like you can do it in less time. The workshops, to be able to have at least a week of workshop time to see what's working before you go into full-blown rehearsal is incredibly valuable. Okay, so what was your second question was about collaborators?
Yeah, the collaborators, your collaborative team.
Yeah, Rick Miller and I worked together for almost 20 years, and then he and Ben Chason and Daniel Brooks and I worked together for about 10 years. So we definitely developed a shorthand. I think having those consistent collaborators is actually really valuable. But I've done it all ways. So I have several collaborators that I work with a lot, both in sit-down productions and touring productions. And then there's people that I've just done one-offs for, like Evelyn and Malaria Lullaby and that team there. So yeah, I think it can go both ways.
And is there typically, I suppose it's different with every project, but typically, what is the germ or the seed or what starts the process?
Ooh, what a great question. I think, like, looking at the pieces that I talked about today, the idea originated with the performers, really. Like, it was Rick's idea to, like, I want to do a show about Jesus, because though I haven't been to church in 20 years, I remember the entire Catholic liturgy by heart. So I want to explore that. And I don't know. And then it just kind of went from there. And we actually I remember we sat on an airplane, and I was tearing out pieces of paper because we were touring Homer, and I built the set, or what I thought would be the set, sitting on the airplane with him as he brought this idea forward. So I think it's that mysterious alchemy piece of theater there. With Bury the Wren, the germ of that is the Donnelly story, but was also my interest in creating dissonance with reality, and trying to really poke and prod and explore what reality means in a performative context. And so that piece came into being through those two, my history with the Donnelly story and my interest in virtual reality, and that brought that piece to life. So I think that's the mysterious piece. And sometimes the technology can be at the center. I've worked on pieces where the sort of initiating artist is interested in a piece of technology and wants to know what story they can tell with it, and then it grows from there.
Thank you. I think I have a third question hanging out there, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I think Louise, you might have a question. Do you?
Yeah, Louise, you wrote, what
You're
is
you're
important to,
muted.
it's okay. What's important to include in a workshop?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So everything, which is a terrible answer. Really. I think as much of the technology that you're interested in working with, to bring that into the workshop is really key. So if you're interested in bringing production or projection into the storytelling, you want that in the workshop with you. Because you don't know, one of the examples that I use is like, you don't know dramaturgically what it means to stand in front of a 40-foot wide version of your own head and deliver text until you actually do it. So in the way that you don't know what the text means until it's in the mouths of the actors, you don't know what the whole storytelling capacity is until you have all the tools. So having projection, and it can be rough and rock and roll, like it can be a boardroom projector and the computer, and you're like, oh, okay, this is them standing in front of a flower, and this is what it means to have blue projected on their face. And now I'm starting to understand the language of it a little more, and just any bit that you can get in there. So even if it is just like, we're going to work with 2 lights that we plug into the wall, and we're going to see what that looks like then in camera projected onto a piece of fabric or a bed sheet that I've brought in from home, that's really valuable. Versus just all putting it in your imagination and then hoping for the best when you get into your few days of tech in the theater. So yeah, the more you can do in advance, the better. And particularly if you're creating a new piece or it's a devised piece, like all of those tools start informing your storytelling.
Any other questions out there before I jump in again? Well, I guess going back to the first production you showed us, which was Homer's Macbeth, which was just such a successful endeavor and looked like so much fun. And you toured it all over the world, I think, did you not? Yeah.
We did, yeah.
So in terms of being independent artists, correct me if I'm wrong, you had support from Buddies in Bad Times to develop that. Was that Buddies in Bad Times show? Yeah.
That was Spin, Evelyn Perry's Spin was developed with the support of Buddies. Yeah. So Mick Homer, yeah. Mick Homer was totally self-produced. Bigger Than Jesus, eventually Necessary Angel came on as the producer. With Mick Homer, we had a producing agent in the United States, and he would get us the touring dates, but it was self-financed. So the proceeds of the touring went back into the production and kept us on the road. Bigger Than Jesus was more of, I think, what is the traditional, at least in Canada, setup of funding bodies and granting bodies, and then doing it at, we did it at the High Performance Rodeo, and we did it at Push, and so making those connections and that touring circuit, which isn't as vibrant as it once was, but that was how we did that show. And Spin was a very similar process where Evelyn did a lot of the producing herself once we did the Buddies run, and then worked with a producer to get it out on the road. But yeah, I think the Canadian model it's primarily that self-producing piece, right? And making those connections with the different festivals, certainly losing something like Magnetic North, which is where we took Bigger Than Jesus to Mag North and St. John's when it was in Newfoundland. And from that experience, it then toured across the country because people saw it there. So, yeah, so.
It remains the case that theater artists have to wear multiple hats to.
Yes. Yeah, it does. Yeah, which I struggle with in my own work. Like I don't like producing And so but finding producers are like almost as rare a gem as production managers at this point in time, like finding those people. But yeah, we have to wear all the hats.
Have you found that, well, obviously COVID had an impact on artists, theater artists and touring artists and all that sort of thing. What's your sense of moving forward beyond that, post-pandemic, and also the place of technology and all that?
That's a great question. So the place of technology and all of this is what gave rise to people really exploring virtual reality performance. And that really the lockdown in particular was what helped us take that to the next level. And there's still not many of us working in that space, but there are quite a few. There are certainly more than there were in 2019. And that's helping us figure out what that space is, like what it's the next iteration of theater. And so what does it mean and how do we do it? But that allows us, like I could put my headset on here and perform for people all over the world. I don't have to leave my house, and neither do they. And so that's a pretty big jump and a pretty big leap into the future. And that continues to emerge. I think the pandemic has absolutely impacted how much we're able to tour. It's been really beautiful seeing the high performance rodeo this year, because it's the first year where it sort of feels a little bit like it was pre-pandemic, where people have come from at least across the country, and there's been a couple of international artists, and that's a real shift from last year. And so I think those are the pieces for me. Like it's starting to see the old world come back a little bit, but still seeing like the FOLDA festival, so the Festival of Live Digital Art, continues to push at that. And they have a lot of hybrid events where there's theater that engages both the digital, whether it's auditory tours or things you can do in your own space, creating theater in your own world, or be there in person and see work that's in person. Or we created a show or adapted a piece called You Should Have Stayed Home that Tommy Taylor wrote about his experience being kettled at the G20 in Toronto, and his experience being thrown in jail. And we rebuilt it for virtual reality, but then he also did performances of it live and in person while he was also in VR. So playing with those tensions, so that allowed an audience of like 50 or 60 people that were there co-present with him, and then the 30 people that we could get in virtual reality at the same time, having two very different experiences. And so there's fun things like that have absolutely come out of the pandemic.
There are a couple of questions.
Yeah, Louise has some questions. Okay, so what did you use for the stretchy fabric? A bunch of things. It's a spandex based fabric that is specifically designed to take projection, and that was through Rose Brand. Rose Brand is like North America's top supplier of all soft goods, and they have been developing a lot of different projection materials. So we used those. The triangle, one of them had a really fun name that I forget now, but that's where we got the big stretchy green screen and the big stretchy projection screen. I've also projected onto, they almost look like tensor bandages, but they're white. And so we built a screen out of all of these tensor bandages, and it was pipe and key clamp frame. And then it meant that the actor could go through the screen, which was really cool. Thank you, Pamela. Inflatables, the blow up ones or the ones that need a fan, and how to make them. Yes, there's lots of companies that work in inflatables, both kinds. I've used both kinds on stage, the ones where we pump the the thing up, and then we have our big beautiful surround, or we had some inflatable characters. I've also worked on shows that use the ones with the fan. The ones with the fan, that show we did custom builds, and it was Rabbit's Choice in Toronto that built us those custom pieces. But there's a bunch of different companies around that can do that. Rose Brand, I think, can do inflatables. I'm not 100% sure, but it is something like you could design them or work with a designer and get custom things made for you. And did Apple pay us for using the box? No. That would have been wonderful. No, then that box, which is so funny, because if you look at laptops now, they're so thin. That whole idea that laptop and bigger than Jesus was actually like, that was how God was controlling everything. And it had a light in there, and it had a little camera, a wireless camera, which at that point the technology was real dodgy. And so we had to build it. It was actually about this thick. So it was like a laptop from 1982. And it was plexiglass. We built it out of white plexi, and found a long fluorescent light. That was we built the box so that the fluorescent light could fit in there, and that was how it glowed. So it wasn't so don't tell Apple. I don't know, I don't imagine that they would fund it, but that would have been nice.
Okay, well, we may have come to the end of the questions in chat, and I'll throw it open. Anybody else have questions for our guest? If not, maybe we'll thank you, Beth, and allow people to go out and enjoy the good weather.
Oh my gosh, please do.
Thank you so much. It was a thoroughly enjoyable and really informative talk. Landon, is there anything that you'd like to follow up with and direct our audience to come to next talks or anything like that?
Yeah, I was just popping in to say once again, thank you to Beth, as Kathleen said. Also wanted to encourage people to come out for the next few On Cue events. The Winter Moon Festival Full Moon tonight is sold out, so unfortunately we can't invite you to that if you haven't already registered. But we will encourage people to come out to the next session of the Professional Development Seminar, which is on February 18th, and that's Breaking In with Heather Kant, the Artistic Director of Persephone Theater, and Jennifer Bruin, the Artistic Director of the Globe Theater. And then the one after that is going to be in March, and that is the Producing with Your Community workshop from Heather Irvin from the Globe Theater. And I highly encourage everyone to come out to both of those, because they're going to be really fun and spectacular, and I'm excited about them. Also, we have 2 shows that are opening in February, both world premiere new works from Regina-based artists and Saskatchewan-based artists, which are I Have No Idea and Night Sweats, and tickets are available for both of those now if anyone is interested. So come on out.
Great, and Beth has left her, perhaps foolishly left her.
No, I welcome questions. I like being involved with the community, and so yeah, I'm happy if you've got curiosities or
That's extremely generous, and once again, thank you, and thank you to our participants for coming on this lovely afternoon, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
And to our funder, Canadian Heritage.
Oh,
thank you, funders. Yeah.
So we'll sign off and wish you all the very best. And Landon, can you just hang in there for a minute and I'll talk?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and thank you to our interpreters for doing such a good job and including everyone.
Thank you.
Make a great video on our website. Thanks very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.